Roslyn. It's known as where it was where Northern Exposure was filmed. So sometimes I say I'm from Sicily, Alaska, but I do live in the Diocese of Spokane, which is Eastern Washington in the Panhandle of Idaho. But I only live about 20 minutes away from the Diocese of Olympia, where I lived for about 20 years until my children a couple of years ago. I spent 18 years working with Episcopal Relief and Development and spent my whole career in international development, primarily at small-scale agriculture, utilizing the just abundance both here and globally. About 7 years ago, I went on a sabbatical and really did a deep dive into looking at how we steward our land assets in the Episcopal Church.
Hey, Brian, this is Tracy. I'm going to interrupt just a minute. You're breaking up quite a bit, and I'm wondering if maybe
for communicant members.
Brian, I'm thinking you might want to turn your video off and give the full power of Wi-Fi to your sound.
Okay, I will do that.
All right.
Hang on one second. Is that any better?
I think so.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Good. And please let me know if it gets bad again, and I will make an adjustment. Sometimes the Wi-Fi goes a little off where I live. But I've had the chance to literally visit hundreds of church agriculture sites in the Episcopal Church throughout the United States, as well as other countries that are a part of the Episcopal Church. That would include places like Haiti and Honduras and the Virgin Islands. And I've just been able to see just the amazing amounts of things going on, you know, all the way from church gardens that are utilized by the congregation and the community, beekeeping, and I think we have someone here from St. Ambrose in Boulder, and I know you've got beehives, but there are more and more beekeeping operations that are happening in the Episcopal Church, and we're starting to see more and more farm operations even utilizing sort of the land assets that we have. And recently there was a group of about 12 individuals that are involved in farming that are based in the Episcopal Church, camps and conference centers, but also freestanding farms as well. So I have been involved in building, you know, coalitions and networks with a variety of dioceses throughout the United States, and so how I'd like to start this conversation is by everyone giving their sort of 1-minute elevator speech about why they're on this phone call. And, you know, maybe you're not actively gardening at your congregation right now, but share a little bit about your interest in participating. But I would just like everyone to go around the virtual circle and just share for about a minute, you know, a little bit about yourself and what you're up to. So I don't know how we want to start, but I'm going to go on mute, and I am trust you all to move around the circle.
I'll suggest that we do mutual invitation, and I can kind of make sure that happens. And I'm wondering if we could invite Mark to speak first.
I'd be happy to. Is everybody able to hear me okay? I go to the St. Lawrence Episcopal Church up here in Conifer, and we have a little bit of a unique situation with gardening as we are above 8,000 feet. In 2014, during one of our vestry meetings, it came up that we should look into having a garden because of our relationship with the Mountain Resource Center up here. They have a sizable food bank, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to both learn about gardening at altitude and providing food. So in 2014, we designed and built 30 gardens with a sizable fence because we have lots of wildlife. And from 2015 on, we have sold out all 30 gardens, or 25% of those 30 gardens have been reserved for our outreach program. And we donate those to gardeners that are not yet gardeners, but will be, and to a number of people that do produce for the food banks. Until today, we've had a very good harvest this year, and then 2 days ago, we decided that we should probably bring everything in. So we did. And but it's been an excellent experience. We've had classes every year, this year via Zoom, 4 classes, one with seed starting, one with our annual gardening class. We had 150 total Zoom attendees in April. Again, in a couple of days later, we were going to do one in person. It got canceled. And then in August, we were going to do a canning and preserving class, which also got canceled. So that's where we are today. I can't wait to go over and see how the garden looks, but it's probably not good. So that's where we are. Hopefully I will be here to learn something from you all, and I'm anxious to hear from you.
Thank you. And who would you like to invite?
Oh, yeah, on my list next over is Jane, actually, so.
Okay, hi. I'm Jane from St. Ambrose Episcopal Church in Boulder. And what we have, going back a little in history, probably over 15 years ago, we had an associate minister at the time who was interested in starting up some, food agrarian. And so she got going that we planted a small orchard of fruit trees. So over 15 years, we've lost some of those. And to be honest, down at Boulder, the production's been pretty hit and miss what we get. Like this year, 1 plum tree was all we got produce off. So it hasn't been a very reliable did a bigger vegetable garden, but it due to lack of manpower and the fact the sunflowers took it over, we now currently just have 2 small raised beds about 4'8". So really we're just doing what we produce for those of us that maintain it really just services our church community. But as mentioned, we do have bees. Currently we have 2 hives that are active. This was actually started a little bit after the fruit trees went in by my husband, but unfortunately he couldn't continue with it because it turned out he was highly allergic to bee stings. So currently the hives are being run by the daughter of one of our long-term church members. She was interested in taking it over. And there again, some years we get honey harvest, some years we don't. This year, because we're now up to 2 hives, I think there was like 90 pounds of honey was harvested this year. So that's actually in recent times been kind of more successful as far as, you know, what we're producing. So I would definitely, if you have a garden, I would highly encourage you to look at adding beehives. So, yeah. So I guess I can invite, I see Susan, if you'd like to jump in now.
Thank you, Jane. My name's Susan, and I am with Grace and St. Stephen's Church in Colorado Springs. We started, we call it the Sower Ministry in 2014, and we began at a large community garden and had some success, but decided that we really wanted to take advantage of being a downtown church and create some visibility around the work that we were doing. So we started off with 4 veggie trugs from Gardener Supply. You know, they're 4 feet by 2 feet. And we started off with that. And then what we did was we reached out. We have a lot of people who garden at home. So we sort of joined the Plant a Row initiative. And we encouraged people to plant garden a row at home. And our model really was built around two things. We have a highly visible garden on North Tejon Street, which gets a lot of traffic. So it's a good opportunity to engage people, talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it. And then once a month, we started having what we call GSA markets, Grace Supported Agriculture. And we would invite everybody who grew at home and what we had in the garden. And after church services one Sunday a month, we would make that produce available for donation, and that money would then go to ESM, or Ecumenical Social Ministries, which has a food pantry. Because what we discovered was we would bring produce in, and the volunteers in the food pantry would look at us and say, "I'm sorry, what are we supposed to do with that again? I've never heard anything about this. I don't know anything about that." So we felt like the better approach would be money. So that's what we did. And then in 2017, we partnered with Fresh Food Connect, which is a food rescue organization here in Colorado Springs, and I think also in Wisconsin. I think there's only 2 in the country. And they partner with home gardeners to pick up excess produce and make it available at community markets, mostly at outreach agencies, social agencies. So that's been our program since 2014. Last year we raised over $2,000 through those markets after the service, and we donated about 90 pounds of produce through Fresh Food Connect to Westside Cares, which is one of the agencies here in Colorado Springs. This year we haven't been able to do the markets, which has been very disappointing. It doesn't give us much opportunity to raise awareness within the parish. But we have donated over 200 pounds of produce through Fresh Food Connect to the Colorado Springs Food Rescue. And I've been really touched by that experience, bringing those boxes in every week and watching the volunteers. They have an assembly line of boxes, and they just take what we have and put it in a box. So it is very much truly like a CSA would be. And so the folks who receive those boxes have no idea what they're getting every week. But I'm looking for some inspiration in how to continue if this doesn't end soon. it's really difficult. We had over 40 people last year growing at home and contributing, and we're down to about 5 this year. And so it's been a real challenge. So I'm excited to be part of it. I'm excited that we get great traffic. We get great commentary as people walk by and see what we're doing. So that's about it. So Mary Lynn?
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me? I am Mary Lynn Grover from the Cathedral downtown St. John's. I just took over the Landscape and Gardens Committee back last September, October. And of course, we all know what's happened in the ensuing year. I'm going to throw the ball to John Bramp because he was the one who knew about this conference call. He has been much more involved in the Metro Caring Gardens that have been set up on the, what would that be, John, the south side of the cathedral, with different volunteers taking over the different plots. So let me ask John to take.
All right, I think she's frozen. John, would you like to take over? And you'll just need to unmute.
Can everybody, there we go. Please, John.
Well, thanks, Mary Lynn.
Uh-huh.
As Mary Lynn mentioned, both Mary Lynn and myself and our families are members of St. John's Episcopal Cathedral in downtown Denver. And I, like Mary Lynn, are from a succession of gardeners that have worked at the cathedral over the past maybe 5 or 6 years. And gardening at the cathedral has been something that has been going for probably the last maybe 15 or 20 years with fits and spurts. The biggest iteration, at least that I'm aware of, was that probably 3 years ago, the south side of the cathedral was actually transformed with the help of a monetary donation from Denver Urban Gardens into something on the order of maybe a 3,000 square foot community garden. In that there are probably maybe 20 or 30 plots, give or take. Last year, one of the parishioners and myself managed one of the plots, and it was great. The main reason for doing it is to provide a resource for one of the big food security organizations here in the Denver area, Metro Caring. Any excess produce that was not used by the individuals that managed the plots would actually go to Metro Caring. The cool thing about it, and I just wanted to kind of dovetail on what Susan from Grace and Stevens said in Colorado Springs, one of the big impetus of having the community garden at the cathedral is that it does create a lot of neighborhood interest. And one of the things that to me was very surprising, the vast majority of people that actually farm in the plots are not members of the cathedral, go figure. But they are members of our community of neighbors just within maybe a 2 or 3 or 4 block radius of the cathedral, which I think is kind of cool to say the least. And that being said, the cathedral does provide the land, they provide the water. The organization of the space, the distribution of produce and so forth is actually handled by Metro Caring. So that's just a way that the cathedral has outsourced the management of the space. I don't know how expeditious that is this year, just because I've been involved with a commercial venture this year, which I'd be happy to elaborate on. But at least it seems like that the vestry at St. John's, at least for the immediate future, has determined that it's best to have, let's say, like an outside contractor, if you will, i.e. Metro Caring, manage the space. And it looks great. I've enjoyed it. It's been fun working. And plus it does garner a lot of street visibility for the cathedral and the Episcopal Church. And I can pass it on again if you'd like, Tracy.
Please do.
Okay. What about, let's see, Sue Carter, how about you?
Hi, I'm Sue Carter from Holy Comforter in Broomfield. And probably 12 or 13 years ago, our church started a green team. And from that, we initially started a community garden, which only lasted about a year, sadly, because we had water issues at the church and having access to the garden. Where the garden was spatially, there was not easy access to water. And then we had a hard time getting volunteers to even come and keep it watered. So that kind of fell by the wayside. And in its wake, I guess you'd say, we started a farmer's market. And we have operated the Broomfield Farmers Market at Holy Comforter for 10 years now. We're operating it this year during COVID, but it's on a much smaller scale. In a normal year, we have 40 vendors and probably about 1,000 people a week go through. This year, we've got 11 vendors, all spaced quite a bit apart. We encourage, social distancing. People must wear masks. We have about 300 and some people come through a week. So it's quite a difference. Operating in COVID has been a challenge, but also in normal years, what happens because because we're a Tuesday market, our produce vendors don't want to keep their produce till a Saturday market. So they've always donated their excess to Broomfield Fish, which is an area food bank. And over the course of 10 years, we've given tens of thousands of pounds of food to the local food bank, which has really been a gift and a blessing. Just as kind of a sidelight, we wanted to put bees on our farmers market lot. We looked into hives and the city of Broomfield won't allow it. So I don't know if someone with bees might have a suggestion about that. We're just trying to do as much as we can to help the area community and to help the environment, but they wouldn't let us have beehives. So strange. And I will invite Sarah.
Okay, I'm Sarah Hartzell. I'm also from St. Ambrose. Somebody's got sound on in the background, I think. So I met Tracy, I think it was it just earlier this year at a conference on climate change. So that's part of the angle from which I've been approaching this. And I apologize to Jane. She's told the story about St. Ambrose much better than I. I haven't participated hands-on in that garden, but I have gardened at home this year. That's been a part of my COVID survival, is gardening at home, and have harvested vegetables from that. So when I heard about this conference, right around that same time, I also found out about a CSU program wherein you sign up your garden and they give you all kinds of gardening tips, of course, and you can give your produce, your excess produce, to a local food bank. So it sounds like that's similar to what a lot of people have been doing. And that's a way I could see myself participating in a gardening program. So that's my main thing. How about Rebecca Brown?
Hi, I've been at Christ the King in Arvada for 9 years now, and when I came, the first thing we had space behind a property that we owned adjacent to the church that people had already started thinking about having that as a garden space, and enthusiastically supported it. What we found was that it was kind of hidden and out of sight. There were the first year or two, we had a fair number of folks. One of our we were hosting at that point a Cub Scout troop, and the leaders were all excited to have a garden there. And there were interesting things that, you know, kind of at the very beginning, there was a fair amount of enthusiasm. We got somebody to string water down so that we could, from our irrigation system, so that we could water down in there and all that kind of stuff. And little by little, the energy dissipated. It was never kind of several of the people who'd been instrumental in starting it had moved away back to, you know, Illinois, where they could garden more easily, I guess. But it was, so when, and then about 2 years ago now, we ended up selling that property. And at that time, when we were, the year when we were looking at selling the property, I was starting to look around and saying, you know, there's spaces around the outside. They're just spaces where we're not doing things. They're kind of in between a fence and a parking lot, for example. And in the meantime, we had many years ago, before I got there, had started what they called an adopt a plot program to encourage people to assist with the landscape maintenance. But we had one woman who said, well, can I just kind of take over? There was one area there was very little to maintain other than weeds. And she kind of said, well, can I just plant some things here? And I think it's been about 6 years now, 7 years maybe. She has developed this remarkable perennial garden that stretches the whole length. You know, little by little she would expand it. Now it goes around around the corner. We have a huge stand of sunflowers at the end, and that's been probably the most successful project per se. I've continued to do vegetable gardens there most years. I kind of did a bed, developed a bed that had been grass that was maybe, it's a couple feet wide and several lengths alongside of the fence. And then we also, for about 10 years, had sponsored a community dinner. And occasionally we would actually be able to use produce for that, although usually we didn't produce enough for it. But one of the people who was a regular attender also wanted to garden. And so she has taken over another side of this area between parking lot and a fence. And so we have at least right now 3 active gardens. I just this past year have been able to form what we are calling our climate care team. And I received a message from one of the folks who said, you know, you're the first priest that's had any interest in environmental issues or climate issues at all. And so I'm actually getting ready to retire in another month or so, the end of October, but I think that group will continue and this past summer, or this past spring, they planted a pollinator garden in one of the areas. They rehabbed a piece a memorial garden that hadn't been cared for quite a few years, and were able to put in a number of, plant that area and maintain that. So I think there's sort of a renewing interest in doing that sort of thing around the space in the church. And then we do have places that could, we have some pretty tired grass that could be easily moved into garden plots if somebody was, so inclined. But we have folks that have a lot of their own garden space, and it's much easier to garden at home than it is to come to the church and garden. And so it's kind of an interesting challenge to find people. And the areas where we can garden are not particularly visible. We're not on a busy street where during the school year because we have a school across the street. But otherwise, it's very hard to get, people aren't going to just sort of stop and look at the gardens and talk with folks along the way. So that's where we are. I'd like to invite Lynn. She's there. There she is.
I'm trying.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. Okay, so I came kind of late to this meeting, and I don't know exactly what we're doing. But I can say that I've been part of the St. Timothy's Community Garden, St. Timothy's and Centennial, for at least 8 years. It may be longer than that. We have 11 raised beds. The kids raise pumpkins in one of them, and that's been very successful. And we grow mostly tomatoes and other items which we sell at the services. And anything that's left over, we give to food banks. This year, we haven't done anything because of the pandemic, and the year before wasn't quite as successful. We don't have, we're losing workers. Have a lot of people that, will give us kibitzers, but not enough workers. So, and I wasn't even thinking perhaps I would join this year, but I was invited to attend this, so here I am. I think I liked hearing the idea that you can contact CSU and they'll give you some tips. That sounds like something that we could use to continue. So other than that, I don't know what else to tell you. I've never been the supervisor of the community garden, just a worker. So there you go. What else can I say? Or
That's great. Thank you. That's just right.
okay.
And I'm wondering if our phone person is Brian, or if we have another person by phone. So
Tracy, do you hear me?
I do hear you.
This is Margaret. The electricity went out just as I was coming online for Zoom. So here I am on my phone.
Hi, Margaret. Good to have you.
I think Lynn said all that has been happening at St. Timothy's. I have heard from Father Nick that there is an interest in our community, people outside the church that might want to come in and take charge of one of the raised beds. So at the moment our garden is fallow, and it's probably a good thing. It's going to take an astronomical cleanup though to get it ready for spring next year. So I think I'll just give Lynn a call and we'll see what we can organize. I've gotten some terrific ideas, by the way, listening this morning, and that idea of hooking up with CSU might just be the ticket for St. Timothy's. So thank you, Tracy, for organizing this.
Absolutely. And Paul, I invite you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Paul Alexander. I'm with the Church of the Ascension in Salida, although the only thing we're harvesting today are broken tree limbs from the heavy snow we got last night. But but I personally live on 45 acres, and we do a lot of growing, have a big hoop house, and we do donate a lot through the CSU Grow and Give. I'm actually on the advisory board of the county extension office and know a fair amount about that. So I'm happy to send out some information and contact information for anybody who would like to have information on that, because it is a great program and we've donated quite a bit to our local community share. We don't really have a food bank, but they do distribute quite a bit of food. So it's really great, and it's been really good thing for the county, I think, to be able to have that. So I'm really excited to hear what everybody's doing. It's really great. And I think I'm the last one, aren't I, Tracy, other than you?
That's correct. And I'm going to turn it back over to Brian.
That was fantastic. I really enjoyed hearing all the different things that people are doing and all the many different ways that people are involved in sort of church-based agriculture, both on a personal and a parishioner basis. And I think there's a wonderful quilt that's being put together in your diocese. And I think being able to come together like you're doing today is a wonderful way to encourage each other, inspire each other, learn things, and really tap into other resources, not just within the church, but in the wider community, the state. So glad that County Extension was mentioned. I think that's an untapped resource that I have found over and over again in the Episcopal Church. And so I'm glad that in Colorado, you are doing that. And I also really love the idea a few of you mentioned, and I just really believe this in a wholehearted way, is that we need to be doing conspicuous gardening, and you know, to really, it's a chance to share with the community what the values are of the Episcopal Church, in terms of food, in terms of sharing that food with other people, and finding ways to share that in the community. I think there's no better way than having a garden that lots of people can see. And I just want I want to plant just, you know, a few different seeds, and let you go from here. We've probably got another 10, 15 minutes before we need, well, more like 20 minutes before we need to conclude. But like I said earlier, I'd really love to see you to continue to do this. And I've watched other dioceses who've done something as simple as an initial Zoom call, but then they start meeting together by Zoom. I think we're all getting pretty good at it during this COVID tide season. But one really wonderful example that you can see on Facebook is the Diocese of Vermont has an ongoing garden party. And what they do is they just have a Zoom meeting, and people share their stories, their concerns, and you know, share things online through a Facebook group, and that might be something you want to do. And since the head of formation for the diocese has convened this, Tracy, I just want to, you know, put in a really strong plug for just the opportunity for faith formation through our food ministries, through our agrarian ministry of planting and growing. I really strongly believe that a garden is the best Sunday school classroom, adult education forum that we have to share our faith. And I was involved while at Episcopal Relief and Development in developing a children's curriculum that you can download from the episcopalrelief.org website. It's called the Abundant Life Garden Project, but it has also been developed into a multi-generational curriculum. I think, I know that a number of your congregations have used it with your children for Vacation Bible School, but I'd just like to highly commend that as a way of doing your work. And I also just kind of want to hold up, you know, the beekeeping at St. Ambrose, and I think that the encouraging of pollination, you know, so much of the food we eat requires pollination. Now, not every congregation can keep bees, but just about all of us can plant a pollinator garden to encourage pollination. Or we could put up a mason we can put up numerous mason bee hives to encourage pollination. And I've even started to see bat houses appear on church grounds. You know, I think these small things are an opportunity for us to communicate our priorities to our congregation. They give us an opportunity to share why, you know, why would a church have a bat house? Why would we put in a beehive? And it gives you an opportunity about the importance of caring for creation. And I think, you know, during this time, you know, this very uncertain time of COVID, you know, I think gives us a chance to think about how we live into this new future in the church. And I have a sneaking suspicion that there are a number of you on this call today who have been thinking about that. We all hear the stories, see the lines on television at food banks, the growth of food insecurity in our communities, and trying to figure out how we respond to that. And so I'm going to go back on mute, and I'd really love to hear what people are thinking about right now as we move. Well, for you, you've sort of jump-started your harvest season in Colorado by the sounds of things. But as you start to even think about next year in terms of your food ministries, I'd love for some people to talk about that. So I'm going to go back on mute, and I know that there's someone there who's given some thought to these types of ministry as we live during this, what a friend of mine calls COVID tide in the church.
I might be able to share something more future forward. So our target agency was called Ecumenical Social Ministries, and it was founded in the 1970s, I think, by the 8 historic downtown churches in downtown Colorado Springs. And sadly, it has had to close. There's too much competition. So one of the things that we're trying to think about doing, and several of you talked about, you know, the challenge of getting people to come and work, to do the work. It's difficult to get that kind of a commitment. So one of the things that I've been working with Father Jeremiah, who's our rector, about is, would it be possible, Grace has a very large lawn, and there are those among us who would like to get rid of it because it's grass and it requires an immense amount of water to maintain. So one of the ideas was, could we encourage those 7 other historic downtown churches to come together and create something along the lines of what Mark and his team in Conifer has, where we create plots, or Rebecca, your group too, and those are then adopted by these downtown churches. So it actually does 2 things. It helps with that visibility, but it also brings together an ecumenical approach. Our largest homeless population lives in the downtown area, and those downtown churches have a lot of responsibility toward that. The city looks to us to solve some of those problems, which we just really can't. But that might be something that was a little bit broader based than Grace and St. Stephen's on its own doing this, but to bring an ecumenical approach. And it sounds like St. John's is doing that with the neighborhood. I love that idea. I might start put flyers on the neighbors' doors and say, would you like to adopt this plot? But that, you know, just to try and keep it up. because it's really important. And it's just, we'll see. Call me back next year.
Thank you.
It's Mary Lynn. I love the phrase of conspicuous gardening, Brian. If you all aren't familiar with St. John's, we are major downtown, and we have been in the midst of some of the riots and the protests and everything else. But having worked in the, we call it the Learning Garden, I was helping plant geraniums that were donated from the city park because they never got enough workers to plant them. And somebody waited until those geraniums got really big and pretty, and then they were gone one day. So we're conspicuous there for sure. But I like what you say about pollinators, because now we're starting to look at the garths and what can we do now to at least beautify the campus for the fall and for the spring before we start the learning gardens again. So thanks for the note about the pollinators.
I would like to add something, and I appreciate what Brian said about just opening the thing up a little bit. I have given this some thought, and from my observation just at St. John's Cathedral, just to piggyback on what Mary Lynn said, we have a lot of on-site expertise and know-how. And when I say expertise and know-how, in my association with St. John's, I've been at several homes, especially during the summer months for backyard barbecues, martini times, whatever. And there are just luscious plots in people's backyard. And it has always puzzled me that there has not been a carryover from what people do on an individual basis from what is done on a community basis at the cathedral, just since that's where I'm domiciled, so to speak. So I have just an observation which may be food for thought. And as we look at COVID-19 and what to do with food, sustainability and so forth, I believe the thing to do is to maybe look at the possibility of maybe trying to do this in a more coordinated fashion. In other words, instead of having individual plots that grow a multitude of things, maybe have it set up where maybe 30% of a church's growing space is actually set aside to grow spinach or lettuce or maybe just one type of crop. Just as a quick little side note, and I'll kind of end with this, I have spoken at length with the folks that actually manage the cathedral plot at Metro Caring. 2 years ago, someone donated a freight farm to Metro Caring in downtown Denver. And for those of you that don't know, a freight farm is a company that actually takes old shipping containers and converts them into self-sustained hydroponic garden units. And Metro Caring is growing leafy vegetables, spinach, lettuce, chard, you name it, on the parking lot of St. Joseph's Hospital here in downtown Denver. And the individual plots, like at St. John's Cathedral, that are managed by Metro Caring, are designed more as community building growing spaces, and that is extremely important. However, if the Episcopal Church is going to do something in a big way to impact the community from the standpoint of food sustainability, then I believe that that could be done better, maybe looking at coordinating on maybe something of an industrial scale, just by managing the individual spaces that we have in our individual communities. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Okay, if I could, I'd like to interject one thing which might be useful. I think if I could impart anything, it would be, because I'm hearing this a little bit, don't be disillusioned if you can possibly do that. Don't be disappointed in this year's or this past year's lack of production or activity at your garden. It will survive, and it's mostly just a frame of mind that I think you need to have. We've found so much success with working in conjunction with these food banks and with the Mountain Resource Center, and getting people to realize by donating some of these gardens that they can become sufficient, not totally self-sufficient, but they can grow their own food and they can take it home and they can learn how to cook and be providers, which they've lacked a lot in the past. So maybe you can work with those folks and expand your gardener world by bringing some of these people in. I don't think it would be difficult to do that. Again, talking from our Mountain Resource Center serves maybe 500 families or individuals over there, that they work with. And they have quite a few people that could benefit from this, but keep that in mind. It's an option. Also, I'm excited by the beekeeping thing. We were going to do bees up there. We've got 10 acres, and on our 10 acres, we have a family of bears. So we've decided to not do bees right now. But we do have a pollinator garden, which does help keep our plants pollinated. So I'm hearing all sorts of wonderful things. If anyone is interested, we plan, and we've been doing this for 4 or 5 years now, to do these gardening classes, and they are open to the public. So if you are interested in getting on a list, it's always in April, or it always has been. And I'm hoping we can do it both by Zoom and in person next year. You can contact me and I'll be able to put you on our list, and I'll let you join up and see if it's worth it. It is kind of focused on high altitude, but I think there is a lot of generic gardening information that you can use. So in any case, it's been wonderful hearing from everybody, and thank you all.
I have one additional thought about how we might build it in if we do some kind of coordinated effort, building in the home gardening thing. Because that's, a lot of people do home gardening, and this might be an inspiration for it. I got restarted on my home vegetable garden by a neighbor who sent out a notice that said, I'm growing starts for certain kinds of vegetables. It's a school project and it's all free. So that's what got me going again. So I can imagine some kind of parallel to put that out there. And I'm also interested in this business of conspicuousness. St. Ambrose is not in a conspicuous location. It's off a big road and basically in a pretty high-end residential area. So I'm interested in ideas about how we could get conspicuous in a location that doesn't lend itself to that.
I've actually really been amazed. We have 2 Facebook presences. We have a group for the Inside Parish, and then we have a marketing outward-facing page. And every week we post pictures of what we've done. We've sort of tracked the progress. And I'm just always amazed by how many people who are not affiliated with the church at all are on Facebook and see it. I do hashtags around food insecurity and all that, and it has actually, we've got quite a little following. And actually yesterday I had a man contact me and say, if you have any bok choy that hasn't been destroyed by the weather in Colorado Springs, I'd be happy to come by and pick it up and make a donation. Not affiliated with the church at all. So social media could be one way to raise visibility about what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Here's another thing that, again, just as we're doing a little brainstorming here, since we live in Colorado, and I like what, bear with me, Mark said about growing at high altitude. How many of us actually grow during the winter? I know in the Colorado, our growing season is somewhat limited to the spring and summer months, but what about actually growing through the winter?
Yeah, this is Brian. I've got a few thoughts on that. There's a church that I visited in Akron, Ohio, that starts in their education block, is in January, and they have grow lights up and long tables in the hallways of this old like 1960s Christian education block. And they starts that go into both their garden, but they also donate starts to the local food bank because there are a number of people that come to the food bank that have yards or they have containers that they can put even on on their patios if they're in an apartment building that has a patio. There's been a few churches that have even put in aquaponic and hydroponic gardens in their buildings. So I think, there's a lot of opportunities for year-round gardening using sort of technology. And I would imagine that CSU would even be willing to work with you guys on something like that. That's just, I get excited when I think about that now that I live in the mountains, that we've got to be creative in terms of how we extend our seasons.
Thank you. And I want to be mindful of the time because we're a little past 12:30. I was going to ask if the group would like to share contact information. I could distribute a list of congregations and your email addresses if you're willing to share. Everybody give me a thumbs up if that's something that you're okay with. And that'll give us,
please.
Okay, great. That'll give us a means for keeping the conversation going as well. And I just want to say thank you. I'm really grateful to each of you for being here today to begin this conversation, and especially grateful for Brian to get us started. He's the one that contacted me and Paul, and we sat down over Zoom and talked about having this conversation. So I'm very grateful to you, Brian, for getting this going for us.
Are we going to have another meeting?
Well, how about I put the contact information out there, and we'll get a discussion going. I think that's the best way. I think somebody would have to take the lead on getting it set up. We could certainly use one of our Zoom accounts to host it.
Okay.
I'm going to leave that in your hands to see what you would like the next step to be going forward. And I'm happy to help out how I can.
Well, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate your time and effort to put this together.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So
Thank you,
everybody,
Tracy.
and be well. Hope to see you soon.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you, Brian.
Tracy, that was wonderful.
I thought that was really good. I learned a ton of stuff.
Yeah, any way I could be supportive. And there's a couple of churches I hope to reach out to just to learn a little bit more about what they're doing, because I think that there's ideas and inspiration that can be shared wider. And I will also send an invitation out to everyone that was on the call for the Agrarian Ministry Facebook group, because again, I think that, you know, there's some things that are already happening in your diocese that I would love to see spread through the wider church.
Okay, that sounds good. And the question was an interesting one. Do we want to meet again? And I need to begin to have other people take ownership of some of these different areas. So hopefully somebody will do that. The group seems very inspired.
Yeah, I think you'll find someone who will step up. And in the meantime, I can, you know, sort of do some seeding. There's a few things that I've thought about, you know, that can bring, you know, congregations closer in touch. Because I think a lot of people who are engaged in this type of ministry can easily feel isolated, and that they're the only ones out there doing it.
Right,
And I
it's
think
hard work.
I think there's some simple things that, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 congregations can do together from a distance. Something like seed saving, or developing, you know, sharing seeds from their gardens from one year to the next. Thinking about some indigenous, you know, plants and food that's, you know, you share in common in the state. So I think this will take off, is my bet.
And I loved your idea about the seedlings, the growing through the winter and doing seed starts and then offering them to people. I think that's a wonderful ministry that all ages could be involved in, and who doesn't like to see things coming up from the ground?
Yeah, I think
Or a
you
little
could,
pot.
you know, I think the diocesan office needs to have a table set up with some grow lights for starts, or everyone who walks through to meetings can see, put it in a conspicuous spot.
Wow, now that I could get excited about that.
Yeah, you know, I know someone in your congregation at the diocesan office with a green thumb, and I bet there are a number of you with green thumbs.
Although the other day in our staff meeting, she said she was so over Colorado, between the bugs and the, you know, Japanese beetles and then the snow and hail, everything.
Yeah, well,
She wants to move back to California without the fires.
So she's just homesick for her girls.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll connect with Vanessa about that. We can be partners.
I think, yeah, the Diocese of Los Angeles they have a plot of land right next to the cathedral center that they put in a living labyrinth. So it's an edible labyrinth.
Did you know that that's what Vanessa did with her front yard?
I've seen pictures of it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. That's probably another reason she's over Colorado, is probably, you know, it's snowing. She's used to see a much longer growing season.
Yeah. And they were very ambitious.
They were. I was like very impressed, but that's pretty cool. Well, give her my best, and let's just stay in touch and see what happens with this.
Yeah, sounds good. It's been really great. And I will, you'll see my email later on with the people's contact information. So you'll have all the names and email addresses.
Yeah, because I'm willing to, if anyone would like my book, I can get it to them at a discounted rate too. So I'd like to make that offer.
Oh, that'd
to
be
people.
wonderful. Perfect.
I've got some leftover books that I got with the author discount that I'm more than happy to mail out to people.
Great.
That'd be good.
All right. Well, you stay
Well, have
well.
the
And
rest of your day.
yeah, thank you. Halfway through. I'm
Okay.
anxious to get all the blankets off my plants.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, right now it's so smoky where I'm at. I just don't even want to go outside.
Yeah, that's what we were dealing with before the snow. So we'll see what happens
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Well, that's good you got the snow at least to tamp down the fires.
Yeah. All right, Brian. You
Okay,
take care.
Tracy, thanks.
Look forward to connecting again.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.